This is Ruger. Taya. And this is the birthday, well, she's not a birthday girl, but she's how much old is she again? 15. It's Taya. And this is the roadmap to success. So primarily we worked with Ruger, and if the camera moves, it's because Ruger's nudging it. But basically, he as a puppy, he had some issues when he was a puppy that I think contributed to what we have going on today. The guardian actually got injured while Ruger was a puppy, so he didn't get a chance to work with him as much. Then Ruger went away to a board and train. And I'm not a big fan of those because a lot of times I find that they use a lot of aversive and punishment-based training methods. And in this, they might not have. But he's just given me a lot of little indications of different things that are often related to people that use alpha rolls and shock collars and that sort of thing. And so basically, we spend a lot of time talking about positive reinforcement. So a lot of us train our dogs to misbehave. The dog steals remote control, we get up and chase it. The dog chews the carpet, we get up and correct it. The dog's barking, we tell it to shush. And then it comes and sits in front of us, we ignore it. It lays down, it comes to us, we don't say a word. So all these things that we want the dog to do, we ignore, but all the things we don't want the dog to do, we immediately get up and correct here. And for dogs, any attention is good attention. So if stealing remote control gets attention and sitting doesn't, well, if I want attention, I'm gonna start stealing remote control. So a lot of dogs get mischievous in our minds, but it's really the way that we interact with them. So to counter that, I've got two things. First thing I go over is what I call petting with a purpose. Second thing is what I call passive training here, this is passive training. I didn't ask him to come. He just happened to be doing a loop. And when he came, I rewarded him and I said just the command word. When you're talking to your dog, only use one-word commands. Typically, they key on the first word that we say. So if I say good sit, and then when he lays, or good come, and then when he sits, I say good sit. And then when he lays down, good eat, good poop. Good means everything, so it doesn't mean any one specific thing. And they typically hear the first word that you say the best. So when he comes to me, I'm gonna pet him and say come, or here. When he sits, I'm gonna pet him and say sit. If I wanna use a hand motion, I use this motion. Sit, and I like to pet under the chin. And I say it twice, so if he knows it, so I say sit, sit. So I say it during the command stage and during the reward stage. If the dog doesn't know it, then I use it just for passive training. Every time the dog comes to me, I pet it and say here. Well, after a while, it's like here just means go to the human and get a reward. I like rewards, so I'm inclined to do that. And after enough repetition, here. Sometimes when we ask the dog to come, the dog's like, yeah, but you're gonna put me in the kennel or it's the end of fun, so I don't wanna do it. Well, in this case, I just wait for the dog to organically offer it on its own and then just reward it and mark it with a one-word command. So that's passive training, waiting for the dog to organically offer you the behavior you want. So name all of your toys. Every time he brings you the little zebra toy, call it zebra. Every time he brings you the little elephant, call it Trump. Every time he brings you a ladder or whatever, name each individual toy. Now, the other side of that is, Ruger, let's not flip over the camera. Ruger, there we go, buddy. And you could also ask the dog, come, by holding your hand up like this. So basically the other, that's Ruger. And so basically the other thing that we do, Ruger, come here, buddy. I know, he was like, but this thing smells like treats because, yeah, and the guardian's using the third console, so just walk through them. Just keep going, there you go. There you go, good job. All right, so the second one that I call petting with a purpose is if the dog is nudging me, like he often does, he sticks his nose underneath and nudges, he's saying, pet me. And the guardians were petting, or he invades their personal space and they were petting him. Well, anything our dog is doing when we pet him is what we're reinforcing. So every time I invade a human's personal space, they pet me. They must like it when I invade their personal space. Nothing wrong with the dog being right here, like he's doing right now to the camera, if we invite the dog to do that. But right now, he's making those decisions on his own. So next time the dog nudges you, instead of petting him and doing what he wants, Ruger, so if he comes over here, he wants attention, sit, sit. Now they both gave me the same response, so I gave them both the same reward. A lot of times I'll have one treat, and I'd have you guys do it with one dog because this will help her. Hold up a treat and say, come. Whoever comes and sits down gets the treat. Whoever comes second doesn't get a treat, unless they give you the same performance. After a while, she's the better behaved dog. She's gonna do it more often, so she'll get the treats, and he's like, why am I not getting those treats? Well, because I'm not doing what's required or what's asked about. So for getting back to, that's a separate thing. So only pull out every once in a while one treat and ask the dogs to do something. Whoever does it first gets the reward. And I would try to do it unless if he's beating her, then you don't have to do that. And before we get to petting with a purpose, also remember, if I'm petting her and he comes up, I'm gonna hook my thumb around his collar and stiff arm him and hold him off to the side, and then I pet her as much as I want. When I get done, if he protested, I wouldn't give him any attention. If If I get done and he didn't protest, then I turn and give him my full attention. But I'm petting her and he comes up and then I pet them both, I'm letting him steal some of the attention I'm giving her. So make sure that he does a little bit of getting in between people when he wants attention at times. And I think that's related to that. And so he's needy, he wants that attention, which is a wonderful thing because we can use that to our advantage. So I want the guardian to start playing a little hard to get. So when he comes up and he nudges for attention, instead of doing what he's telling us to do, which is leadership mindset on the dog's part, we're gonna give him a counter order, tell him to sit. When he sits, we're gonna pet him under his chin, say the word sit, and then we pet him as long or short as we want. Just gonna at least pet once, but then we keep on petting him if we want to. So what we're telling the dog is when you tell the humans what to do now, nothing happens. But if the humans tell you what to do and you do it, you get a reward. And after enough repetition, the dog will start sitting in front of you to prepay for that attention. When he does that, then you wanna make sure you do recognize or reward that. Now, I have 2 watchwords to help us remember these things. I say paycheck if I suspect someone's petting without a purpose. If Taya's here and I'm petting her and she's standing up and somebody comes in the room and says, paycheck, I would stop petting her, tell Taya to sit or lay down, and then pet her and say crash or whatever her word is for lay down. And then explain to the person, I asked her to lay down before you came in the room. When you opened the door, she stood up and I continued petting her, which is allowed, which it is. But if we argue about it, the dog's like, oh, he's on one page, David's on one page, I can be on my own page too. So it's just a nice way to reinforce. And then I say the word recognize or reward if the dog does something I want. So if Ruger came to me and I missed it and the guardian said, hey, recognize, I just turn and I look at whatever Ruger's doing, I just narrate. If he's standing there, I assume he came and I pet him and say here or come. If he's sitting, I pet him and say sit or crash if he's laying down. And so this way we can remind each other to not pet without a purpose and to make sure we do reinforce the things that we want. And we do those things enough, the dog will start offering those behaviors as a way of getting attention. And the nice thing about these is they do really 3 or 4 different things. First of all, it helps the dog build up more respect for the human because the human is the one that's in charge of giving the order. So they're being obedient, they're practicing being obedient. Number 2, the dog is earning that affection rather than me giving that affection. I sat and I was rewarded for sitting, so I got paid for doing that. And it gets a boost of self-esteem. It also helps them practice the behavior because even though I can sit pretty well, I can't sit really well when there's a house full of people. So the more we practice sitting, even in easy situations, to make it easier for others. And so if you get in a habit of petting with a purpose and passively training your dog, every time you pet your dog, it becomes a mini dog obedience training session that boosts its self-esteem, boosts its respect for you as an authority figure, and helps it practice a desired behavior. Really becomes a gift. It'll take you guys about a month to get in a habit of doing it. Once you do, like I said, every time you pet your dog, it becomes a reward or a training session. Now, we also talked about exercise. Ruger being really in his prime, he's under 2 years old and he's a black lab. Those dogs have a lot of energy. And right now, we live kind of out in the country, but right now it's kind of not really ideal outside. So we have a long hallway here. We can play fetch here. I would suggest the family look into getting an iFetch because that'd be a great way to burn some excess energy. Now, if he comes up and he's being a nuisance to the other dog, we should interpret that as his way of saying, I need some exercise. And go right over here and spend 5 minutes tossing the ball back and forth. You'd be amazed at how much a 5-minute session of fetch will improve your dog's behavior. I talked about starting an exercise a journal, keeping that for about 2 weeks to a month. And that way you start writing down the time and how much exercise, the time, and every time there's a dust up or fight, a barking incident or whatever they are, when they eat, when they poop or whatever. And at the end of the day, you start looking, every time it's longer than 3.5 hours before Ruger gets exercise, that's when he gets naughty or when he gets into trouble. Well, now we just start giving him exercise every 3 hours to help maintain that good behavior. And they're both asleep on the floor off camera right now, and this is what we like to see. So you spend 5 minutes, he'll spend 5 or 10 minutes recovering, and then he'll just lay down and take a little bit of a nap. You redirect him in a positive association or a positive activity, and then we burned his excess energy, and now he's a good, well-behaved dog. We have a kid in the house, and it's really, having dogs is kind of like having kids. A lot of it is distracting them away from the things you don't want and redirecting them towards the things that you do want. Now, I also, Ruger was chasing a laser, which would be a nice one. And remember to Google scent games. Since he's a hunting dog, that'd be really beneficial and help him in hunting, but it's also physically draining for dogs to do. Now, what I do when I have a dog that fails a situation is doesn't behave the way I want. I recreate that situation when I do have time to practice. So what I do is I recreate the situation in the easiest version possible, and I break the activity down to into a whole bunch of individual steps. Let's say the process takes 7 steps. Well, then I go to the easiest version of the process, and we practice step 1 over and over and over until eventually the dog's just offering me the behavior I want during step 1 automatically. Only then do I move to step 2. I practice step 2, same way. I do all the individual steps till the dog knows this is what is expected. Each individual, the dog just went to the dog bed, which is awesome. So I know how to behave for all the individual steps in the easiest version possible. Then we do it the easiest version possible for all the steps together. And then we gradually start raising the criteria and then making it back to a real world situation or the hardest version of that. So you can do this with, one of the things I'll describe is for the dog, leashing the dog up. The child mentioned to me that Ruger gets very excited when we pull out the leash, and I get to see it. So what I would do is practice that. So go ahead and walk to where the leash is. And as you're walking the leash, as soon as the dog walks in front of you, it's taking the leadership position. So as soon as it walks in front, just turn around and walk away. Sit back down on the couch. So the dog's like, oh, we're not going. It comes back, and then you repeat the process. It might take you half an hour walking back and forth. And the instant the dog walks in front of you, don't say no. You're saying no through your actions. As soon as you get in front of me, I lose interest, and I go sit down. After a while, the dog will figure that out and will stay behind you as you walk all the way where the leash is. Then the next step is I tell the dog to sit. And the dog sits within 3 seconds, then I continue. If it doesn't sit within 3 seconds, I walk all the way back to the couch and stop. Or restart the whole process. Wait for the dog to calm down, then I go back again. So let's say I tell him to sit and he sits because he's pretty calm. Then I start reaching for the leash. As soon as I reach, the dog's like, gonna get up. And I pull my arm back down and I give it a command to sit again. If it sits within 3 seconds, I reach again. If it doesn't sit within 3 seconds, I walk all the way back to the couch. The secret to this is to practice this at times that you're not actually going on a walk. It's commercial during the basketball game. Get up and spend 5 minutes doing this. And then when you sit back down and don't go, it's like, oh man, every time I used to pick up the leash and then we were going for a walk, now it's only 1 out of every 5 or 10 times. I'm not gonna be as excited for that. And we're helping him practice, like I talked about earlier, each individual step. So first step 1 is I walk behind the human on the way to the leash. Step 2 is I sit down or the human won't continue. Step 3 is I stay seated as the human reaches for it. As soon as I get up out of a sit, that stops the human from reaching. And again, we give him 1 opportunity to go back to doing what he's supposed to do. If he doesn't, we go all the way back to the couch. It'll take you, I had one guy that this took 1 hour and 45 minutes for. But then when we went on a walk, he's like, it was the best walk I've ever had with my dog because the dog was calm and balanced and we help the dog practice the behavior you want. And after a while, the dog just stays behind you, sits, and it stays calm throughout the whole process. Okay, we also talked about incorporating rules. One of the rules is not allowing the dogs on the furniture because the higher they sit, the more rank or social status they have. I might make an exception for her because she's a senior dog. She's not going to be with us super long, and it gives her a little bit of status that he shouldn't have anyways. I recommend getting X mats for the furniture, and so that way, if you're getting up to go to the bathroom, you just grab the X mat from under the deal, put it down, and then you go to the bathroom, and it holds your space for you. After a while, we'd want 1 on each cushion and 1 for the ottoman. And eventually, after a month, you push it between the 2 cushions. And so we remove 1. And then eventually remove 2 the next month. And after a while, the dog just practiced at not getting on the furniture. And remember, giving the dog the ability to break the rule is not necessarily is not rewarding it. It's a privilege, but it can confuse the dog into wanting to come up here more and more often. And for now, especially because we have a baby on the way, we have a little one, I would think that having the couch as an off-limits zone would be a good idea for the dogs, at least for Ruger for sure. So another rules would be he has to sit before I let him out the door. I go to the door and say sit once. If he doesn't sit within 3 seconds, I walk away and sit down somewhere and I wait 1 minute. After 1 minute, I go back to the door and I tell him to sit again. If he doesn't sit this time, within 3 seconds, I walk away for 2 minutes. Next time, I'll walk away for 4 minutes and 8 minutes. And set a timer because you won't realize how fast or slow it goes. And eventually, when he goes to the door, you go to the door and say sit, and he sits, you open that door. That becomes the reward. And then you eventually do it with both directions. I would do it actually with every doorway in the house. Let me see, other rules: not be allowed in the kitchen when we're preparing food, not be allowed the humans when they're eating food. The humans are going to eat something first, and then she's going to eat in this room back here. When she's eating, he's not allowed to be in the room. And I would probably not have her nearby at first. And then eventually when she's done, she leaves the room and then we put his food down and he gets to go and eat the food. When he's eating, she's not allowed to be there or anybody else. Now in the video above, we talked about petting, and I would definitely do that. I would kind of go through, follow all the steps in the video above about resource guarding, making sure the dog's calm before it's fed. But then eventually, once you've done all those things, that's when you do the touching of the bottom hip, and the adult should do this first. So just touch the bottom hip while he's eating, and position the bowl so he's against the wall so he doesn't kind of oscillate his rear end around. And at first you're just touching the whole meal. Then after a while you're scratching the whole meal, but you're doing it on his hip. Then you grab each meal, you move 1 inch closer, and eventually you're on his front hip or front shoulder. Then you're going here, and eventually you can have your hand under here, and he's eating while you're kind of petting him. And once you get to the point where you're doing that, he should be pretty comfortable. Then I would have her do it with the human there, only with the human there, and have her go back to touching the hip, then gradually moving all the way back, so he just gets accustomed to her being around. Now, we also recommend that she goes in this room for the first week with about 10 treats, maybe about 7 treats, and then with an adult, and then Ruger walks in there, she touches his nose with the treat, shows him she got it, and throws it outside. And he runs out and licks it up and says the word out, when she would say the word out. So that basically after a while she could say out, and he understands to leave that room. I would actually deal with each doorway in the whole house. So go around with her and with you guys too, and then basically give her, take one treat, tear it in half. If this is the doorway, this is the room, and this is the hallway, touch his nose with the treat, throw it just 3 feet outside the room, and when he goes out there and gets it and licks it up, say the word out. Then they call him back in, and he'll come back in, do it a second time, then go to the next door in the house, next door in the house. Do that for all the doorways or areas of the house. Then we would reverse it, stand in the hallway and throw the treat in here and call it bedroom. Throw the treat in the kitchen and call it kitchen and dining room and so on and so forth. And we keep on doing that, so now we have directional commands to teach the dog to leave the room as well as to go to a specific room. I also went over teaching the dog how to use the dog bed. If you have any questions on that, let me know. But just for about a week, for about 3 days, 10 treats 3 times a day. Say the word every time he licks it up. Then leaving the treats there when you're watching TV, he's not paying attention, and let him find them. And then say the command word every time the treat goes in his mouth. Or lead him there to put him in a sit or LAY, put the treat in his mouth, and then say the command word. He's about to get one right now.
Look out.
Look out is the command word. Remember to use fun command words. Because we have kids in the house, if we say crash and the dog lays down, look out, which is Marshall's from that cartoon where they hang out. Or you say, lasagna means you can eat your food. It's kind of funny, and the kids will recognize that, and that makes the kids kind of brings a joyfulness and a levity to the situation, which can help mitigate a lot of problems. Now, I'd also like the guardians to institute a rule so that if the dog is on the dog bed or in the kennel, the only 2 people that can bring the dog out would be the primary 2 guardians. And even them, I wouldn't recommend doing that. We want the dog to run away if he wants to go and hide in his kennel. Then he gets to go in there, he's safe, and nobody's allowed to take him out of there. So we could help him practice that. And again, the daughter should probably be involved in that. And she goes over and just touches his nose with the treat, throws it in the kennel. When he goes in the kennel, we call it house or palace or whatever we call it. And then we throw another one right outside, and he runs out of the kennel. And we call it liberty or freedom or whatever the word is, but it means to leave the kennel. So we help her practice that, again, with about 10 treats. So when she calls him out, he's more inclined to want to come out. And that's something I'd like her to do, get in the habit of. If she wants to pet the dog, she should have the dog come to her. The parents have really said that she shouldn't be allowed to interact with the dogs unless they're there, which is a good idea. But if the dog comes to you, most of the time, and you ask the dog to come, it's coming more subordinate position. But if you go to the dog and the dog doesn't want to be petted, or is on the dog bed, or has a bone or something like that, that could create a problem. So it's just a good habit to get into. I also went over how we can use candy to motivate little ones. So get a little jar or a coffee mug, get some glitter, put her name on the side and some other things. And then we explain to her, hey, every time that we pet our dog, that's how we say thank you. Would you say thank you before or after I give you this piece of candy? She says, after? Great, thank you. And then so we tell her every time that you ask the dog to sit and then pet it and say sit, and tell us, we'll go put an M&M in your jar. And then at the end of the day, she gets to go add up all those M&Ms after dinner, and that's her dessert. She gets them for the next day. Or she goes and tries to pet the dog what's on the dog bed. Oh, I have to take an M&M away for this. Do you want to earn this back? Oh yeah, and then she steps away, and then we put the treat back, the M&M back. So the idea is we create positive association for her to want to. And then we have another little one that comes by who might not have the best dog manners, but she's a little one, so we don't know what she's doing. We haven't seen her do anything, but we could also use the same positive reinforcement for that. So maybe he comes over and just say, hey, look, this is what we do, and every time you pet the dog and say thank you, get an M&M, and we're going to spike it with 10 M&Ms to begin with. But if you do anything wrong, we take those M&Ms away. And so after a while, the kids are now telling the dog to sit and lay down and come and do all these great things, and the dog is earning rewards for doing those things. And the dog's practicing listening to the little ones and having a positive association with the little ones, which is really beneficial. One thing I didn't mention during the session, but I would love to have the guardians do this, is to practice teaching the dog new tricks or skills. If we have a mentor or a teacher that really helps us, we have a lot of respect for that person because they helped us on our life's journey. And they were also associated with us learning new skills and commands. And so, hey, sweetheart. And so basically, if we go to YouTube, and maybe each Sunday, one of the guardians goes to YouTube, and first we're going to teach the dog to roll over. And find out only positive dog training, a positive way to teach the dog to roll over. So we teach the dog how to do that, and at the end of the week, The dog knows how to do it, and then we make the dog do it. You want to go outside, roll over. You want your food, roll over. You want to pet you, roll over. And after a while, the dog's just rolling over like there's no tomorrow. I call it stunt dog, roll over. And then next week, the other guardian takes over. And she might teach the dog, bang, you're dead. And if you teach roll over, bang, you're dead should be the next thing because they kind of use the same thing. So basically, each week for 8 consecutive weeks, we trade off, and we're teaching the dog new tricks or commands. And then that way, at the end of 2 months, by the time spring rolls around, the dog has now 8 new commands, plus all the other stuff that they know. Just like humans, confident dogs are able to handle new situations or stressful situations much better. So if we can teach the dog some new tricks and commands, it's going to boost the self-esteem of the dog. It's going to help increase the respect for the human. It's going to make give us different ways of redirecting the dog's attention. One of the things I went over was a leave it exercise. And that can be a command as well. It doesn't always have to be a trick. And if you forget how to do the leave it exercise, message me. Leave it exercise I'd like you to do, for the first 2 or 3 days, you're going to do that first step where you're holding it in your hand. You don't say leave it, but as soon as the dog backs off, you just give it a treat from your other hand. Then you're going to start dropping it. At first you drop it and you cage it right away. Then you drop it and kind of hold your hand there. If the dog goes for it, you cage it. But the idea is to hold your hand up here and the dog just eventually looks up at you. Then you give a treat from the other hand. The dog never gets the treat that you drop. And then eventually what I like the guardians do, once the dog really you can just drop it like this and you can put your hand back and the dog doesn't go for it. Now the dog knows the command. Now we can actually use that command for a practical application. We grab one of what are those things called? The little big-eyed furry thing that we just were doing?
A bumblebee.
What is it called though?
Minion, I think. No, it's a bumblebee. It's just a stuff.
But there was a name for that type of toys, I thought. Anyways, we just throw that toy in the middle of the living room in between dad and the TV when we're watching a football game or whatever. And the dog starts going towards you. You say, leave it, and the dog walks away. And then we reward it for leaving it. After a while, it gets practiced seeing it on the floor. Yeah, it is a bumblebee. And the dog gets practiced leaving it alone. And then we do the next toy. The next toy. So we teach the dog to leave all the toys alone because first we establish the vocabulary that leave it means leaving things alone gets you a reward. And after we practice that enough, the dog is more inclined just to not do it because it doesn't chew on those things because I have a house full of other great things to chew on. Let me see. Use the escalated consequences to disagree with unwanted actions and behaviors. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we went over that you want to talk about. All right. Now, I'm sure that as soon as I stop filming this, they're going to remember 2 or 3 things. So make sure you call or text me. The number that I've been calling you from today is my personal cell phone. So program it in your cell. And put down doggone problem. So if 6 months from now you forget my name, you can always search for dog and it'll come up. Now, if I don't hear from you, I assume that everything's going great. But if there are problems, I have thousands of videos. Instead of having to come out here, I could probably send you a link to a video and you can go through them. Ruger. Oh, and also remember invading personal space. So if he gets in your personal space and you pet him, you're rewarding him. So if he does get in your personal space, Ruger, sit. Always try to redirect him as something you want. Then pet him and say the word sit or whatever it is. And so instead of correcting him or getting upset that he's invading your personal space, we're redirecting him to something else and then rewarding for that. And after a while, like I said, they'll start prepaying for that. Well, this is Ruger, and this is, come here, sweetheart. Come here. He's like, I'm going to come over here. And I keep on wanting to say Taya, but it's Taya, right? Sit. Well, this is Ruger, sit. This is Taya, sit. And this is their roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog. Only sometimes you mean it. Sit. Sit. That was a belch. All right.